mute the other window. Fine, I've done
Okay.
that now.
All right.
Yes, thank you for inviting, and thank you for yes, having me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our chat, and I'm so glad you decided to do it live because nothing beats the immediacy of the moment.
You know, it is a particular kind of thing. As many people have said, so this is something I've learned about my time on YouTube that and live streaming and within the TLC is that different people have different preferences. There are people who there's something that's very fun and interesting about live conversations. There's something that's very different about, I would say, lower energy, much more controlled. It's just different. I don't know, it would be interesting to lay out what I think is different about it of recorded conversations. There's something even more different about private, unrecorded conversations. And there's something different even live streaming about not having like a universal link drop, because I know there's a number of particular people that I know in the TLC and friends who do not and will not come on my live streams if it's an open link.
Yes, I understand. I guess it depends on what we as YouTubers think we're doing. For me, I think I'm propagating a message. For you, you might have a more social club narrative and purpose to your streaming, but maybe a lot of people haven't thought it through. They just see it in terms of monetization, number of viewers and subscribers and live viewers. So I think a lot of people do get confused. Even people who think they're doing it as political activists, they then become this YouTuber only concerned about monetization and live views, and in the end miss their purpose, in my view. So yes, we must be clear about our purpose, but then not everyone is or wants to be.
I think one of the things that you and I, where there's been miscommunication between us about my purpose, is I think for me those things are hard to separate, like whether I'm promulgating ideas or whether or not it's a social club. To me those things are kind of inherently tied, and there is really no separating them, because like either and there are much bigger kind of ideas that I do believe, that I would say I'm trying to sow the seed of, that I think is connected to like a lot of all of my personalist knowing and relationships being primary, like relational ontology, those kinds of big ideas that I talk about. The way that I do live streaming and talk about stuff and interact in the TLC, as far as I know, and it is like in accord with those ideas. Like the reason that I behave the way that I do is because I believe those ideas are true.
Mm-hmm. And I think people are often working things out as they speak, and because they can't be bothered to write a diary, because once you start putting everything down on paper, it will become clearer. In fact, it used to be a therapy. It's like, you really hate someone, well, write down everything you hate about them, but don't send the letter, but you'll feel better. You burn the letter. And I think it is the act of processing our thoughts into sentences that can be heard and remembered and analysed that is part of the group therapy thing that is a lot of these online social clubs, in my view. And I think, maybe if you just, want to say, you can be in this group if you're Christian, American, a conservative, a Democrat, a Republican, and all these things. Are kind of badges of membership of some group.
Yeah, what are the badges of the membership in the group of TLC, Claire?
I would say American, Christian, post-Christian, liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, and obviously, people who who want to discuss MAGA and those who hate Trump, which is, a great sample of middle America as I see it. It's a very important and valuable demographic.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how you frame all those things, because a lot of that was very national. So like you had these different categories, right? Of a lot of this is how one conceives of or relates to their identity, like this came up in a conversation with here's my way into that, because I don't know what the categories of, I would probably answer that question differently, of like what are the identity markers that make up TLC people, because you went like national and then political, which like I just like political to me, because I think in America right now probably the religion is kind of politics, basically, because we've lost deeper aspects of religion. And so to me, most political conversations tend to be, in my opinion, they're often very superficial, because they're operating at superficial identity levels. And I think religion and culture, like the things that are deeper than that, are often much deeper conversations. But like Sam Tiedemann sent a group chat. Oh, that's so nice. Look, a friend just messaged me and he said, "I love you. That's why I'm paying attention to you." That's so nice. Look at that. But Sam sent me this. Let me see if I don't know that I can share it. Let me see. This probably won't work, but it's because Sam's always sending these statistic things, because he's, has a statistics background. So he has this chart, like this thing, where it says like, how often do you think about the meaning and purpose of life? And then it's either never, seldom, yearly, monthly, or weekly. And then it's separated into all these different religious categories, right? So atheists, Buddhists, agnostic, Jews, nothing, nuns, Hindus, mainline Christians, Catholics, Orthodox Christians, Muslims, evangelical, Black Protestants, and Latter-day Saints. And I read those in the list of like the lowest. Well, I suppose it's ranked based on, because the red is like how often you think about it. So atheists in general, on average, think about meaning and purpose of life the least amount. And then it's Buddhists, which, I mean, that kind of fits with Buddhism a little bit, is like that's their whole thing, kind of, as far as I understand it from the outside. But Latter-day Saints are the most. And so it's kind of interesting, but then my response to that was like, this is the difference that Sam and I have, is like, he said, and whatever, I think Sam would say it's okay for me to share this, sorry, and then I'll get your response to it. So he said, the ranking of those denominations seems almost precisely correlated with being devout or engaged with your faith, instead of it being an identity. And so I said, because we're talking about identity and TLC and identity, and I said, no, it's just a different kind of identity is being prioritized, because like that, like how often do you think about it? That's the kind of identity that's being prioritized, right? How often are you thinking about these things? But just how, like, what's going on inside your head, inside your thinking, is just one aspect of identity. Like what you think.
But when people talk about identity, they mean status. You see, I think that's really what they mean. It's like, do people think I'm a good guy or a bad guy? Am I high status or low status? And I think this is important in order to orientate ourselves into correct behavior. We can only behave correctly if we know who we are, in the ranking of our group.
Yes, but I'm trying to say, like, even thinking of knowledge as knowledge inside your head, abstract conceptual thinking, because how you think about yourself is a certain way of thinking. there are some people, there's all kinds of cultures and people and temperaments and capacities in the world. There are people in the world who don't really think about themselves that much, who don't have internal monologues. So they're not thinking about themselves that much. That it's just a different way of relating to yourself.
Yeah. So all these forms that we might be filling about our age, our name, and the for employers to kind of prejudge us and think, oh, he's married, he's going to behave like this. She's not married, she's going to behave like that. And I guess they want all these pieces of information about us in order to predict our behavior. So we can have objective labels like middle-aged white man, married, not married, what religion, and then you begin to build up a picture. Which school did he go to? Did he go to university? Was he a dropout? Blue collar, white collar? I mean that's what all these bits of information are for. And I think a lot of neurosis is caused by this lack of religion, which is basically the problem of all Westerners. They think their religion is Christianity, but actually, I don't think they believe it. This is my, it's just a cultural affinity. I mean, the other day I was saying, your religion is something you should wear as an armor or wield as a weapon. It's not an accessory you go and buy like a necklace or a bracelet or a belt or earrings. And if you're going to use it that way, it's not going to work.
So what would it mean? What would it mean? Well, I mean, I don't even know in America. I would say I don't even know what the current stats are of how many people identify as being Christian. But again, like, this is what I'm saying. Like, we've talked about this in the corner forever. Like, a conversation has been going on forever and probably will continue, is what does it mean to be a Christian? And I've argued for a very long time and will continue to argue that just merely self-identifying as a Christian does not make you one. That is
Very true.
it's a very to me it's a very superficial way of identifying as a Christian. So what makes someone a Christian, Claire, in your opinion?
Well, there are certain formal ceremonies that have to be undergone, such as baptism and a confirmation ceremony.
So sacrament, ritual.
Yeah, it's a ritual that you undergo, and once upon a time, respectable English parents would ensure that their children would be confirmed. They would take their confirmation classes. There would be some kind of ceremony, and if female, she would be wearing a white dress like she was a bride, and and the bishop would come and place his hand on the children to be confirmed. It's that sort of thing, and then you are a paid-up member of
See, and
whatever.
what's so interesting about, like, baptism, particularly infant baptism. See, this is actually a telling thing, right? So there's two different views on baptism, largely in the Christian church. One is like infant baptism, which like you're just baptized in the community before you have conscious self-awareness and even like self-identity. Self-identity isn't even possible for a baby. So,
Yeah,
like,
that was why the Anabaptists were so badly treated. They were mocked as the people who wanted to be rebaptized. And they were just saying, hey, what's this Trinity thing? We never understood, and we're expected to agree to it. Can you, maybe give us a few confirmation classes or something to tell us, why we believe what we're supposed to believe and stuff
right.
like that?
But what I'm trying to, so like the thing behind the thing that I'm often trying to get at is I'm saying there's two different fundamental ways of understanding identity. I think like the Anabaptist approach, that's just like, yeah, we couldn't, they're taking one variable, which is my own conscious self-awareness and identity with a thing. And they're absolutizing that, in my understanding, to like the totality of what it means to be a thing. But what I'm saying is there's diversity within Christianity, and there always has been, about these things, about baptism. Like, I mean, there are people who believe in believers' baptism, like the Anabaptists, who would say that goes all the way back to like the very beginnings of Christianity. Whereas most of the major, very ancient forms of Christianity they've always baptized babies. So
Well,
like,
it's actually a Jewish thing because the Jews have this thing called a mikveh that they're supposed to, regularly dip themselves into to cleanse themselves and stuff like that. And of course, Jesus was baptized, wasn't he, by John the Baptist, who
mm-hmm,
was a Jew.
mm-hmm.
So, these practices go back, before Christianity, and we can understand, this whole purpose of, cleansing of sins and, a kind of creedal affirmation of, a ritual confirmation of creedal statements is a ceremony necessary to say you're in our group now. You've undergone that ceremony. You're one of us now, or you haven't, and therefore you're not one of us.
Right. So what I'm trying to do, though, I suppose, like, to track all the way back, to follow the thread all the way back to where we started. We were talking about, like, what does it mean to participate, because we were talking in TLC, and you listed TLC as just like political, American, a lot of these different things, which I don't, because I'm really trying to get at, like, what makes a thing a thing. And there's all these different categories of identity markers. And then we went into, like, what makes a Christian a Christian. And then we were talking about baptism. But then I'm saying there's so, like, sacraments and rituals, but then people differ on those rituals because of whether or not they have self-identity and self-awareness to something. Like, I am not a Christian. That's what believers' baptism is like, I am not a Christian until I consciously, within my own ideas and self-identity, relate to this, to, like, this group, this set of ideas, this church, as a thing that I want to be part of. But people who baptize babies obviously don't, like, that sacramental baptism, like, that baby does not have that. They are just given it by the nature of their birth.
Yes, and how important the baptism is to the parents of that child. Do they, are they the kind of parents who would take the trouble to baptize their children, or not? But I think it's even more fundamental than that, for an American, because way back in the late 1800s, there was this question arising as to whether America is a Christian nation. And Justice Brewer had a few things to say, and it seemed to be yes and no. Yes, we are, but no, we're not, kind of thing. So I think this is a question that remains unanswered to the modern American, and I guess people would say, well, we can't be a Christian nation as Americans because the founding fathers have separated the church from their state. And they're still arguing against that, but then most people in America who consider themselves to be religious are in fact Christian. So this is a kind of unsolved, unanswered question, which I think is part of the problem, because people just need a gang to return, to go to. Ever since we were children, we go to school. Who are our friends? Are we happy with our friends? Do we want to join another lot of friends who may reject us because our parents are not good enough or not rich enough or whatever? We don't know. And as we leave school, we're still looking for groups of people to join. Unions, political parties, golf clubs.
What would you, Claire? So I want to ask you about this question above, but first, so, like, I want to talk about this next, but first, before we do that, I want to see what you think about that. What are the groups, like, what groups are you a part of? Can you share with us? Like, when you just were to lay out, because my wife and I will often talk about this, we think of it in terms of, you know what a Venn diagram is? Where they're like circles, how can I need to always have paper that I can draw on here.
I think I get your idea. I mean, we're part of a big circle, but we don't share all the characteristics of that circle.
Well, like, a Venn
interlocking
diagram is like
circles.
overlapping circles. So we often talk about our life that way, is like we have all these overlapping circles, which is just like our family, our extended family, our church, our kids' school, the different activities and groups that our kids are a part of, our own personal friend, my wife's friends, my friends, book clubs. We have all these different circles. And we've often said that part of the way that we see where we are going to prioritize and spend time is how much overlap we have with certain Venn diagrams, because we almost have to work that way because you don't have time. Like if all of your circles are disconnected, you're too spread out. Your butter spread over too thin over toast, And
Yeah,
so like
and
what are your circles?
well, they would be English speaking circles, right? English
Right.
speakers
That's a broad one.
interested in discussing theology, politics, and religion, um, you know, and obviously as part of the Anglo-American Empire.
So your circles are English speakers and political topics.
Political, religious, and moral topics, yes.
What do you have any hobbies outside of these things, or friends that don't do those things?
Um, yes, a few, but obviously, for people who are not interested, you can't really talk to them about these things because they'll start getting upset.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have the capacity to be interested in someone who isn't interested in the same things that you're interested in?
I just talk about the stuff they want to talk about,
Okay.
and respond, I hope, in an appropriate and helpful way.
Yeah. So do you
Because
have
there are lots of
people?
things people not interested in your subjects can teach you and tell
For
you
sure.
about the world. Mm.
For sure. Do you have regular interactions with people in your life that you talk to who aren't interested in things that you're interested in?
Um, I think most people are to a degree interested in questions of morality and politics because we're all affected by what our government does. So I just don't see any escape from that. Even if you don't think you're political, you will at some stage in your life be complaining about your government and saying that the law is an ass and that you were unfairly treated.
Sure. Well, listen, in my like kind of anarchist utopia though, everyone would stop. Like we could get over the mind control that we all have to pay attention to politics because it affects us all. And if we all stop paying attention to it, all of a sudden it would stop being important.
Yeah, I mean, we maybe we want to live in a world where we don't have to take such an interest in politics. But I mean, I think we can't help but notice that our ruling classes are not as they should be. They don't seem to be keeping their promises or even doing the sensible things, and then that kind of makes us question everything they tell us, everything they want us to believe, what we ourselves believe. And then I guess we question about, well, do we really believe in the things that we want to believe, that we claim to believe in? And I don't think people do. And the only way to know that for sure is to argue with people who don't agree with us. And then we will know what we really believe.
So, do you think, back to Paul Allen's quote here, or his text, what do you think about this? Do you think that's what we're doing here? The ritual TLC is what Claire is doing now, getting on a live stream and talking things out.
Yes, I think that's what we're doing. We're just saying what's on our minds. And hopefully, the people listening might find it useful or of interest and might even solve their own problems through it. Um, I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. And to some degree, so there's this guy that I like sometimes. Rod, if you're here it comes. Rod thinks I'm obsessed with this guy and likes to make fun of me, but I'm not. David Dark he's an author, but I once heard him say in a conversation with this ex-Christian, post-Christian, deconstructed Christian Dave Bazan. He used to be in like a kind of quasi-Christian band called Pedro the Lion, but great band, by the way. Dave Bazan's he's actually a really great musician.
Mm-hmm.
But they were in a conversation together, and David Dark, he's a philosopher. He's like a theologian, I think, in Nashville somewhere. but he made the point that because they were talking about this stuff, and he said that Christians, even historically, Christians, it wasn't a self-label that they put on. Like initially, Christians were just called followers of the way. And then in Damascus was the first place, I think it says this in Acts in the Bible, but said it's where people were first called Christians. That's where the term, and it was a label that other people put on them because of how these people were behaving. So it wasn't a label of self-identity. It was a label put on from the outside due to a certain group of people's behavior. And so then from that, David Dark says that what a Christian is someone who bears witness to the witness they receive, which I've always liked as what it means to be a Christian. A Christian is somebody who bears witness to the witness they receive, which is a pretty broad definition, but I like it.
Well, I don't see what a Christian could have witnessed. I mean, if you mean it was, anything to do with Jesus, we all have to take it on trust that, the narratives of our religion are true. But I think what we can do is undergo the procedure of comparative religion and understand how each religion works. And, if you think our religion is not serving us, then maybe think of, a better one that protects our interests more.
Sure. Do you think that what do you think about this thing that I often like to say, that like all true knowledge is received via initiation? What do you think about that?
Well, I would ask you what you mean by that, and therefore I would have to ask you to give an example of true knowledge.
Yeah. So the reason I like it is that I don't think you can really know anything properly until you are participating with it, communing with it, until you are involved in it. So like I know English because I'm participating in English. I speak English. This is debatable. Some people would say I maybe don't like English, or I don't know English. I would say that I know Christianity because I participate in it. Whether or not America's a Christian country, I grew up in a Christian family. I've gone to church my whole life. I'm regularly participating in Christian ritual. I don't see, and this is the thing that I think is really hard. One of the, I think, ramifications of, if this is true, that all knowledge is only had through initiation, you could add in like Vervaeke's 4 Ps. So like procedural, participatory, perspectival, propositional. Like you can't understand something from the outside. And this is like where all those P's come in, because like if you think that you can propositionally understand another religion from outside without participating in it, I would say that's a delusion, because you can't have proper participatory knowledge or proper propositional knowledge, like analyzing it critically from the outside without participating in it. You won't understand it. It would be like someone, like I would say to some degree, I understand chemistry because I went to school for chemistry and I participated in it. I went to labs, I took tests, I was trained by experts in the field. I have a certain degree of initiation, although it's not continued to be active. So I have a certain degree of initiation in that. You don't understand chemistry without that. You can't.
So with regard to truths, there's actually still a lot of stuff we can agree on, such as if we're going to be starting a business partnership or a lifetime partnership or bringing up children, we would like our partner to be honest and reasonable and principled, maybe, though we might disagree about what kind of principles we want them to have, depending on our religion. But there are certain wide areas of agreement. Yes, it would be nice to have a bit of money and status and stuff like that. That people who are not really wanting to argue with you for the sake of being argumentative would agree on. And I'm not suggesting that you can't, that you don't examine the theory and practice of religion. I mean, the theory of religion is basically what is claimed in their scripture. And then the practice of religion, well, you have to look at these Jews, these Christians, these Muslims to see, what they actually do with their religion, whether they follow it properly, and their relative status, as far as each other are concerned. And
But do you
I think ultimately we are concerned about these things, aren't we?
Do you think someone, but again, that's back to the whole initiation thing. So do you think someone who is a non-Christian can judge Christians for how they're executing their religion if they haven't been initiated within Christianity themselves, just via the propositions of the scriptures? Because I would argue they haven't been, if you haven't been baptized, if you haven't been taking communion, if you don't have family, if you haven't been going to regular religious rituals, how much do you actually understand the religion?
Well, they might want to convert to it because they think Christians are a powerful group. I want to be part of that powerful group.
But you're missing my question. Like, how can they critically analyze the religion from the outside? That's the question.
Through the status of that religious group and the behavior of those who are, in that religious group. I don't see why that's, I don't think it even needs to be stated.
So I guess what I'm trying to ask, this is what I'm trying to get at, and I'm realizing through talking to you about this, it's a hard thing to pin down exactly what I'm asking, and I'm even realizing what I'm asking through talking to you. Let's first principles, right? You like to talk about first principles. Let's just assume, for like the sake of argument, a thought experiment. My first principle is you can't understand anything without initiation. Like you can't. You don't understand it without being initiated in it. Like my chemistry example, like my religious example. So then this would be like, so then you're saying like people judge Christians of whether or not they're a Christian and how accurate they are living up to their religion through just a critical analysis of their religious texts. But to me, that would be like one facet of it. Even if you take Vervaeke's 4 Ps, that would just be like, all you have there is propositional. And I would say part of what initiation is all of those. So it's like participation. It's rituals. Back to what you said before. That was your first answer. What makes you a Christian? Baptism, sacraments. So like, if you aren't participating in all those things, if my first principle is right, you can't understand it at all, and so you can't judge from the outside.
Well, all I'm saying is that even atheists see the utility of religion, don't they? I mean, they say things like, "Oh, it's just mind control," and
but even seeing utility is only propositional.
Yeah, so maybe that's enough. We don't need to conduct experiments on. I mean, if we already know what's going to happen if we do a certain thing, for example.
But what would be the basis of having such faith in the propositional? Because that's something we talk about in the TLC is propositional tyranny. That's what that is faith in just merely the propositional as a way to discern and analyze and orient your life.
Well, there's something called teleology in philosophy, isn't there? It's the idea of once you understand the purpose of something, then you understand the thing, really. If you don't know a chair's for sitting on, you might, not be, you might be putting stuff on it and using it as a shelf, for example. But once you know what this concept is all about, then it all becomes clear. And as far as religion, whether or not we believe in God, we would agree that religion is about controlling the beliefs and behavior of the people who are supposed to believe in it. Surely that was always a purpose, because even non-religious political ideologies are treated like religion, such as liberalism, communism, fascism, when it was still in existence, but that they are a kind of religion, really, with their own fanatics and their own heresies.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. So I have a question for you. Do you want me to send out the link broadly and open this up, or do you want to just keep talking to me?
I'm happy to keep talking to you, but it's up to you. It's your stream. If you're tired of talking to just little old me and you want the others to join in, feel free.
No, listen, I am trying to be a hospitable host. So like I thought we were just going to have a private recorded conversation, and then you thought the live stream would be more fun. And so now I'm just asking if you want to open it up to other people. Listen, this world is your oyster.
I will leave it to the host. I'm happy either
Okay.
way.
Look at this. Are we getting Nigel Rarity? What's the topic? See, interesting. Like this looks like, is this from Rumble? Am I getting Rumble people? Look at that. I don't know that I've ever that. I think
Oh, that's nice.
Rumble comment. Yeah. Listen, Nate, this is also true. Initiation isn't postmodern. So Nigel, what I would say, what is the topic? I'm talking with my acquaintance friend. Are we friends, Claire? Would you categorize us as friends?
I'd like to think so.
Okay.
I'd like to think so, Luke.
So we are, I would say broadly, I do live streams somewhat regularly, once or twice a week, maybe, about a variety of topics. Typically I monologue and then I drop a link where anyone can come in and talk about things. Claire is someone who I have come to know. She is a person who, we are online acquaintances, and we've gotten to know each other a little bit through this community that is, I would say it's called This Little Corner of the Internet, or TLC, which I could explain what that is. There's a great video on what is the TLC made by my friend Neil Daedalus, which maybe I could find it and put it in the link, but that's what we're doing, Nigel. And the topic that we were talking about this morning, I think we're talking about religion and identity, and whether or not, and like how do you get proper knowledge?
Right.
And that was my assertion, is that you only get proper knowledge through initiation,
Or
participation in something.
or just going for better authority than yourself. It's like, oh, you just told me a story. How do I know it's true? And you might say, there were some witnesses to what I witnessed, and I'll use them as my witnesses to confirm my testimony. But I thought before the stream started, the title "Collective and Individual Punishment" might be a good title. I don't know, because it's also to do with identity and the fear of punishment, which is also religious and theological, as imperial and moral.
What prompted you to think of that title? Where did that come from?
I think it was something to do with the streams that I had been listening to from PVK and talking about Iran as well.
Yeah, part of what's interesting about that is that, like, collective or individual, as you know, I mean, as you might know or probably know, but I'll just tell you, I don't really like. I'm a big person thing. That's my personalism, personal knowing.
I suppose I should talk about collective and individual punishment because, just so there's no dead air. I like this topic because of its religious, political, and moral nature.
I don't know what's happening. I think it's like a permissions thing where it kicks me out occasionally. But shoot, what was I just talking about? Because this is something I want to talk to you about. It's a do you remember what I was saying right before I left?
No, Will, I think I have ADHD too.
Right. So Blast it.
About the topic, the title of this topic, I think.
Oh yeah, collective and individual. Person. What is a person?
Yes.
To me, really, because I've said this before, as so, because Christian theology is interesting to me, and I think this is true. There's two of my Lukeisms that I think are true, that summarize a lot of things for me. So thank you, Nigel, you beautiful, tall, bald man. I think that every meaningful and interesting intellectual conversation is about the nature of the God-man relation. So like the relationship between God and man, that conversation, and which is essentially, from a Christian perspective, is the topic of Christology, which is why I'm so obsessed with it, which is why Sam Tiedemann is one of my best friends in the corner, because we like to talk about Christology and the Trinity a lot, because he's a biblical Unitarian. So that, and then I have another Lukeism, which is the locus of all meaning, of any and all possible meaning, is the person. So like, what is a person is a big question. It's a really big question. I think it's the central question kind of the world, really. That's my assertion. And so, but like, to me, a person is not an individual or a collective. So because a person is both of those things, a person is their own, they are like the term non-fungible, unique, one of one. A person is that. So in that sense, it's kind of an individual, but also what makes up a person are those one of one relations that are non-fungible, non-reproducible. So like my mother has two sons. I am the only youngest son of my mother. There isn't another one. So like you can't reproduce that. That's me. And this is kind of like what George MacDonald is getting at when he says that, like, when God makes a person there as an image bearer of himself, there is something fundamentally non-fungible and unique about that person that God technically could not have made any other way, because that's what that makes that person a person.
Yeah, so even if you had a twin, you might not agree with your twin. And PVK has been interviewing a pair of twins called Brian and Brad, and they don't agree with each other about Christianity.
Right, but even
politics.
those two, although they share all the same material, genetic inheritance, they're like epigenetics. How they have lived their life and the decisions that they've made have made them two completely non-fungible, distinct people, although they hold all the same biological genetic inheritance,
Yes, and recently there's this pluribus, I don't know, Chris Howard was talking about it because he'd seen it, and it was about this kind of people who were really happy, but they were all alike, and talking to one of them is like talking to all of them. And there was this woman who wanted to retain her individuality and hated them. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I guess it comes from E pluribus unum, which is your American motto.
The many, out of the many, one.
Yes.
So it's the many. Yeah, I've heard about this show a lot. So I've had multiple friends who have really recommended it to me. I've heard about it enough now where I just might have to. I just hope it's one of those things. Maybe I can talk my wife into watching it with me, because I don't. When I watch TV, I'm either watching it with one of my kids or my wife. I don't tend to watch a ton of TV by myself, although I like watching TV a lot, but might have to check it out.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it kind of, went awry towards the end, but one thing I really did enjoy watching was American Primeval, which I would recommend watching with your kids at all.
It's a great show.
You watched that one?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and certainly very different from the westerns that you might have watched, and thinking, wow, these Americans were really mean to each other.
Yeah.
And even the Mormons were mean to other Mormons in order to, keep the secret.
Right. Yeah, the settling of the American frontier is interesting, and that's particularly about like some of the intensity of the Mormons back then, because it's about that Mormon, whatever, that giant massacre, right? Mormon massacre thing.
Mountain Meadows massacre, I think it was.
Yeah, I
Yes,
can't
it
remember.
was about a true historical event. Um, but yes, it's interesting, and I was thinking to myself, if these Americans had already been Muslim, maybe they wouldn't have had to kill so many of each other. And I was thinking, if the Europeans had been Muslim, they wouldn't have, had to. Well, there would be no need for the English Reformation. If Henry had been Muslim, there wouldn't be a problem with him, marrying up to 4 wives to sire a son, and he wouldn't have needed to break with Rome, etc., etc. So
So
that's my
what are you
little.
saying? There wouldn't have been a mass. There wouldn't have been. I couldn't connect all the dots. There wouldn't have been a massacre, a Mormon massacre, if we were Muslim.
Yeah, because then the Mormons, I mean, then you wouldn't have fought each other over whether I guess the problem with the Mormons is that they were polygamous, and I guess all the monogamous Christian Americans were saying no, we can't let them breed because they'll take over the whole country, and we can't let them do that, and therefore we have to exterminate them.
You're getting some pushback. So because Muslims never kill each other, and Nate, you're not that's not gonna strike Nate well.
Oh, right. Well, I'm certainly not saying that that Muslims never fight. I would be the first to admit that Islam is an imperial religion, but so is Christianity. You see, and I'm saying all
Well, that's
these
debatable.
organized religions have something to do with war and law and sex and violence, and it's inescapable.
Well, that's one of the things. So speaking of Nate here, this is so like one of the things that Nate has always said, because I don't know if you remember when John Vervaeke, who's one of the luminaries and of the TLC, one of the, big thought guys out there, but he was always trying to create through his curriculum of practices. He was trying to create the religion that's not a religion, right? And Nate, which I always thought was very true, Nate has always said Christianity always has been the religion that isn't a religion. So,
I don't
so
quite
like that,
understand that.
yeah. So that viewpoint would be that Christianity isn't imperial, and that would be my understanding. I mean, I identify as a Christian anarchist, so that would not be imperialist.
But the point is that Christianity only came into being when Constantine the Great said, "I'm going to use that religion for my imperial purposes." That was
So it depends on, it depends on what you mean. If you're talking about Christianity as what it has become, which is almost intrinsically tied to the political and the state, and like being the religion of empire, of course that happened with Constantine. But like what we were just talking about before, there were followers of the way even before there was even the term Christian. There were followers of Jesus before any of that, way before Constantine. I mean, that's all, like, that's been nonstop since Jesus. Constantine wasn't until the 300s.
yeah. So, but the point was, Constantine didn't do it for fun because if you go back on the history of the times, Constantine had to go through that. There was a lot of wars. The year of the 3 emperors and the year of the 5 emperors, and there were all these Roman generals who basically thought they would like to become the Roman emperor. And I guess Constantine must have thought, we have to give them something, that will make them better people and not so ruthless and warlike. And Christianity may be the one. So I guess that was how it started. But I mean, I think we have to admit that without any Roman emperor saying, I'm going to make Christianity my religion, Christianity would never have taken off. It would just be a persecuted religion, sort of like the Coptic Christians in Egypt, and it just wouldn't have become what it is today.
But don't you think there's some degree that the reason that Constantine, I mean, there was a big shift there, but don't you think part of the reason that he adopted Christianity as the state religion was because he, in his opinion, to some degree. I mean, I don't know how you would prove this, but in his opinion, somehow there was a political expediency to adopting it. It had become popular enough at that point that, because I mean, what politician would adopt a religion that everyone hated?
Well, yes. So you have the sort of struggle, and I tried, but but now this is a new religion, and he was kind of doing that. I mean, he actually called the Council of Nicaea and said, Christian bishops, come to Nicaea, agree on a doctrine, and then I'll roll it out through my empire. But they couldn't agree because there were these Arians and these Athanasians who couldn't agree. And then there were all these Roman emperors who were Arians. And then until the year 380, when they made Trinitarianism the only legal kind of Christianity around. I mean, and then of course there's also the first 7 ecumenical councils, which is basically agreeing on the doctrine and the rules. There were 7 of them. They had to get the story straight, and I think even now,
to some degree. I was just talking this Sunday. I was just talking with this couple who are inquirers at the church. They're wanting to become members or wanting to become Orthodox. And one of my buddies there, who's a local deacon friend, so he's a guy who, he's gone to seminary, because deacons, I mean, sometimes they're lay deacons, like our boy Joseph Lambrecht in the corner, but a lot of times deacons go to seminary, and a lot of them have ideas of potentially becoming priests, but it just doesn't always work out. So all that to say is, like, he's studied, like he's been, academically initiated. Well, and in an Orthodox seminary, I guess you're also doing all the religious rituals too all the time. So we were talking about this though, and he was saying, I think this is largely true. I don't know. I haven't read through all the ecumenical councils, but he was saying that it's somewhat like St. Augustine said this, that what doctrine is a hedge around a mystery. So he was saying fundamentally how Orthodox theology categorizes itself, because we were talking about differences. This person who's wanting to convert grew up Catholic. And so we were talking about differences between, like, the Eastern Church and the Western Church, both Catholics and Protestants, Lutherans, and then the Eastern Church is that, and this is the reason one of the biggest reasons that I initially started going to the Orthodox Church is it's fundamental, like by its nature, it's mystical. So it's mystical Christianity, which means that it's defined by what it doesn't know versus what it asserts to know. Whereas I would say Catholicism is almost the opposite. So it's like apophatic and cataphatic theology, positive and negative theology. So like in the East is much more comfortable, the Orthodox Church, by saying God is not this. We define God by what he is not, because you can't really define God by what he is. But I guess I would argue that all of the councils and everything, I think you tend to think of the councils as being very cataphatic. I think they're very apophatic.
I'm not even sure I know the meaning of that word. I'll admit I don't know what you mean by cataphatic.
What something is versus what it is not. Cataphatic,
Okay.
You are saying God, like a cataphatic statement about God would be God is love.
Mm-hmm.
And an apophatic statement about God would be like God is not a spaghetti monster in the sky. You're saying what he is not versus what he is.
But isn't he omnipotent, and couldn't he be anything he wants to be? That's what Christians say to me,
No. I think God is what he is. I don't think he could be whatever he wants to be, because even within that, you're inserting a division within God, and God is one.
Well, yes, I suppose the response would be, yes, God could do any number of things, some of which are arguably mad and silly, but why would he? Why would he, contradict himself? Why would he, be evil or tell lies, for example? and then we're reminded again that the Abrahamic God is omnipotent, omniscient, perfectly moral, supreme, and eternal, and and we must not, according to the third principle of Judaism, conceive of him as it being in any way like anything we have ever known, and certainly not physical or material. And that's Maimonides' third principle of Judaism.
Yeah. And and this is where, like, when all our Jewish friends, I need to save that chat somewhere. We're talking about this with Sam. I think it was on a Jacob stream about, they were talking about the Trinity and what kind of which forms of the Trinity would be acceptable within a Noahide thing. And Yosef was saying, like, I'm okay, because I think that is a very different, because I would affirm that, like, if you're talking about God the Father, all those things are true if you're talking about God the Father, within a Christian frame. But I mean, I'm going to have subtle differences with aspects of Judaism, obviously, but yet one of the things about Christian theology is that, and even when you were talking before, is that God, for me, for a Christian, God is personal. So, like, God the Father is a person, which I don't really even know how to talk about, because, like we were saying, God the Father is, because of that rule, that Orthodox rule of Maimonides, I don't even know how to talk about God the Father that way. I know much more how to talk about God the Son, Jesus Christ, as a person, because he's fully human, which God the Father is not.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so Jews and Muslims have a different, conception of God, and that's why they're not Christians. You see, but obviously Jews and Muslims have their own disputes, because I think Jews saying, we were the ones who first received divine revelation from God, and he would never, make another revelation, and Muslims are saying, but he gave us a later, final, and better revelation than the ones he gave Jews, and it has, it's all of humanity, and it's universal. So that I mean, I know there's a kind of theological arms race even amongst the Unitarians.
Towards what?
Towards a correct conception of God, and which scripture is more authoritative, because
But wouldn't that, like, having a correct conception of God, wouldn't that be against Maimonides' third point?
Well, Maimonides was saying Jews should not conceive of God as in any way like anything they've ever come across, and certainly not material or physical, meaning he can't be a man. Which is something Jews are quite strict about, and so are Muslims. And even though there's no love lost between Jews and Muslims, they agree on the Unitarian nature of God. And so did the founding fathers, because they were Unitarian. That was.
I don't know. I mean, Sam would say that. I don't know that they were all Unitarian. I mean, they definitely weren't. This is something that I don't think they were Trinitarian, or a lot of them weren't. I don't know who was who, but they definitely weren't just, like, clearly the kind of American Christian now that's just like, the founding fathers thought of God just like I do. Well, no, I don't think that's true.
No. I mean, there were clearly heretical Christians, and the Christian Unitarian Church only flourished in this country because of the First Amendment, because they just wouldn't have been allowed in Europe, and that I think is what I think the founding fathers were rebelling against, because in the good old days of absolute monarchy, you as a subject had to follow the religion of your king, or else be burnt at the stake. And this is something I don't think Westerners are acknowledging directly, even though they may have heard of people being burnt at the stake from time to time. But this was pretty routine.
Yeah, the king rules all. You have to, I mean, that's super, I mean, we have that in Christian and Jewish and probably Muslim theology, you know, Daniel in the lion's den, and Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the fiery furnace, you know, bow down to this God or I kill you.
Yes, and the interesting thing about
Which is what we still do, by the way.
But so much of it is political, because in the book of Samuel, there was this question, when the Jews said, "Oh God, give us a king," and God was kind of saying, my law is not good enough for you. You want a king who will, tax you and make you die for his imperial wars. Is this what you really want, Jews? And the Jews said, yes, that's what we want. And they had terrible kings. Not that I think Christians enjoyed, better, monarchs themselves, and that was why it was rejected in the last 250 years, that there were all these republican revolutions that displaced the age of monarchy, and I think the founding fathers had to quarantine Christianity because Christianity was the religion that defended the divine right of kings. And that's why it had to be, separated from their state.
Christianity did?
Well, yes, because Britain still has a king, and you may have seen the coronation of King Charles, and he was anointed. It's all about this anointing with oil from Jerusalem and myrrh and whatever that they have. It's a formal ritual. And of course, David, the Davidic kings were also similarly anointed. This is a very old tradition. And look, once upon a time, the European kings were mere warlords. They were illiterate. They couldn't, read. They were impressed by Rome, because once upon a time, the ancient Britons were conquered by Rome. And when the Roman Catholic Church sent Christian missionaries to convert their kings, I'm sure eventually they saw the logic of it. Otherwise, they would just be left with Celtic Christianity, right? Which wasn't as glamorous as Roman Catholicism, and that's why you had the Synod of Whitby when they disagreed about the when Easter began because of the calendar thing, and calendars are of course very, very political indeed.
Calendars.
And we know that from when the French had their revolution, they changed their well, that's where we get metric from, and they changed their calendar and made a week 10 days, and a year 10 months, and then they drove themselves crazy and went back to monarchy and Christianity again.
Yeah, I mean, calendar, I think you're right. I mean, I think historically all those things have been very connected. And I mean, and in some way you can't really escape it, right? Because it's kind of like the whole like after modern era, before modern era, and it's just like who are you kidding? Like what is the defining event that happened before, like that, where there was a before and there was an after? Because people don't want to do like, before Christ and in the year of our Lord. And so, all right, here we go. Are you okay with one conversation partner, Claire?
Yeah, I'm enjoying myself really,
Okay, good.
because I think it would be it's the best way for us to get to know each other and understand each other's ideas. And as far as you were saying that we can't escape from our history, and of course that's correct. Because Christianity did build the West, and even if you don't like it now, you have to acknowledge its foundational basis on matters like empire and law and politics, and even the reaction against Christianity, which I think was liberalism. Liberalism was the attempt by the European to free himself from the tyranny of absolute monarchy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's largely true in America. Sorry, I want to clarify. Are you okay if we add one other conversation?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, please do.
Because someone asked, and I think this would be a good dialogue partner for you because they know. I mean, I don't know if you know. Do you know Matt C?
I
He
think so.
he knows a lot about certain things that I
I think
definitely
he
don't know
blocked
about.
me.
Matt
I might
C,
have blocked you on Twitter. I think we go way back. I think we've shared a stream with PVK like 2 years ago or something.
Okay.
Um,
I do remember.
early days.
Right.
all right, Matt.
Oh,
What do you?
what
What do
were we
you?
discussing?
Yeah.
Probably secular Coranism.
Okay.
It was probably at that time it was something with American characteristics, or right. There was a different branding, I think.
Well, obviously,
Earlier.
to Americans, it would be with American characteristics, and if you
Yeah.
guys were Italian, it would be Italian characteristics, and
Mm.
so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So Matt, lay us out something. I got about 20 minutes in me before I'm
Sure.
going to burn out. How about you lay out, since you asked if you want to be in this, and so you've been listening along for a while, give us some definition, give us some boundaries, shape a little bit of the rest of our conversation here.
Well, first of all, thank you for letting me come on.
Yeah.
I have to admit that I was listening to the earlier bits, and then I went into a work meeting, and then I came out, and I was hoping to try to align myself to wherever you guys are currently at, so I didn't derail things.
Well, what we
Uh,
were just talking about was whether or not, I mean, and this has kind of come in and out, whether or not Christianity is an empire and how it's tied to monarchy and politics. And what Claire was just saying, which I think is pretty obvious, is that part of what Christianity, at least in America, is doing is there was a separation between the kind of monarchical aspects of Christianity, which is what freedom of religion is all about. Is it's not like I don't have to have the same religion as my monarch.
Well, I think I see an on-ramp.
Okay.
Claire, would you say that liberalism, and let's take your, I actually enjoy your framing of liberalism, it being a response to and reaction to monarchical Christianity. Would you say that liberalism is also imperial?
Well, yes, because liberal democracy is now global and has become imperial.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't disagree. I think that's something. I appreciate the stream that Luke did last night, and I think one of the shining examples of that conversation with Jacob and the rest of the gang is that I think a lot of folks in the West, classical, liberal, or progressive, or otherwise, tend to let's just say that I think there was a dog that wasn't barking last night, and that's about whether or not Americans of every stripe would like to be in a new war. And that's often not something that we evaluate. I think if I get the impression right, Claire, I think you might actually enjoy playing with this. The idea about whether or not our new adventure in Iran is in America's best interest or the West's best interest. It sounds like it might be another liberal imperial project. It remains
Well,
to
the
be
people
seen.
are never consulted, are they? The people expected to fight and die for these wars are never consulted. And if they try to express their opinion, they would be told that they're peasants and don't know anything. So, this is really the danger. I mean, it happened to the British, right? They still they declared 2 world wars on Germany, and they lost their empire.
See,
And
again, the only people that matter are the people who know all the facts and information, right? Who have this, kind of monoculture, post-liberal, modernist propositional understanding of facts outside of initiation. We just have this universal knowledge of geopolitics and world history, and whoever has that right is the one who's smart enough to enter into wars, you know?
Yeah, Luke, you were talking about truth, but I mean, for all practical purposes, truth is the opinion of the powerful, and that is, unfortunately, what we have to work with.
The truth
They
that's
control the
exercised,
media.
yeah, I mean, the truth that is just exercised via like the machine and systemic power, yes. But that's why I like to quote George MacDonald, is like, mere lonely power has no power to create, but because love is the power of power. Creative power is not through coercion. It's only through love. That's real power.
Yes, but the problem is, if we have children, they're going to say, "Oh, but mum, but dad, the school says this thing. Are you?" And they'll say, a word ending in "ist." Are you a fascist? Are you a racist? Are you a misogynist? If you want to question anything, they've got all these words, these weapon words to use against you to shut you up, and the previous generation as well. So
just become impervious to those words. Can you imagine those conversations with me and my kids, Claire?
Well, I don't know how old they are. They're probably not at university yet, where they'll pick up even more ideas and words to question your beliefs.
That's great. Let's rock and roll. I've been waiting for this my whole life.
You're threatening Luke with a good time there.
That's right.
But yeah, these weapon words are political and religious, right? Because they have so much effect on people, because they think they know all what these words mean, like good and evil and justice and right and wrong.
Yeah, but like those kinds of things don't. I think we're kind of moving past that era a little bit, where like I was watching every once in a while, there's this Penn State professor, I forget what his name is, but he live streams his classes, and he has very open kind of Socratic dialogue with the students. He's a sociology professor, I think, and his classes are just packed full, but he'll like bring people down. He live interacts with them. He live interacts with the audience, and they just like, and he asks questions and they go back and forth. Very Socratic. It's cool. And he was saying, like, at one point, one student was up there professing kind of more like woke, left-leaning perspectives. And then he asked the question of like, okay, is there anybody in the crowd who'd like to ask her some questions and push back? And a bunch of people raised their hands. And he said, oh, isn't that interesting? He's like, 10 years ago, none of you would have raised your hand. And that's kind of showing, because like that ideological way of thinking, like to call somebody a racist or a fascist or a bigot or something 10 years ago was like it was very powerful. It shut people up because there was a strong mind control and spell over the whole world, where like if somebody called you a fascist, you just get terrified. But now we have, what's his name? Who's the guy they always call a fascist, who just embraces it and doesn't give a shit? The political guy.
Which one?
Trump.
No, the young curly-haired Chicago guy. You know what I'm talking about?
No. Yeah, Fuentes.
Yeah,
Steven
Fuentes.
Pinker?
Huh?
Oh, right.
But he's like, I would just say, for anyone who has eyes to see the pattern and the shifts, like he's showing you that that's over, because people don't care anymore. Like older boomer people, like there are certain groups of people, sorry, boomers, but like there are older groups of people who think that kind of cultural currency still has power, but it doesn't. So like, and I'm kind of the same way. I'm just like, whatever identitarian label you want to call me doesn't hurt my feelings. Like I'm over that.
I think, to your point, Luke, and to yours, Claire, I think the last several years have kind of undermined the cultural cachet that those ists words have. That maybe that's abundantly obvious and doesn't even need to be said. But I think if you strip them away and you look at who is arguing and using which words of power, in particular, whether there's a hot war engagement in the Middle East or something, or maybe it's in Ukraine, or those kind of situations. I think there are many cultures, and this is probably the norm. There are many cultures where if you take the words away and you just look at who's arguing, you're just seeing people arguing for their own people versus a people that is not theirs, right? It's my cousin versus my neighbor, my brother versus my cousin, however that phrase go, myself
Mhm.
versus my brother, right? And then whatever tools are available, whatever words, whatever ists you need to use to defend your tribe versus, it's in-group, out-group stuff. I think there are a few cultures, and this is interesting, I don't know, they align with the traditionally liberal cultures. Be interesting to evaluate whether that's the case. But there are a few cultures where you actually can't tell which side people would be on based on their heritage. It could be that they're there based, like people like Luke here, who might be, someone who's not necessarily just going to be arguing for people who look like him or who have his same identity or heritage. You know what I
I
mean?
actually only like people who are exactly me. Classic narcissist.
Yeah. And just to button it up a little bit, there are people, you might say people like the Fuentes character who are maybe represent a subgroup of folks in the West who would like to do the tribal thing. And I don't know. It just looks like we know exactly where that goes in other countries and in other cultures. You just get balkanization. So what do you think about that?
I think the most important thing is that we should be able to disagree with each other and still talk to each other next time we bump into each other again. And I think the TLC is pretty good for this. Luke has kicked me off his stream and I'm still talking to him. It's no big
True.
deal. Part of the rough and tumble of, online discourse. And that I think is very important. If we need to hash out issues, Chad said in one of his streams that we owe it to ourselves to be more antisocial online than we are in real life. To obviously friends and family members that we were anxious not to alienate, and therefore we should just let everything hang out and say what we mean. Because that's the only way to understand others as well as ourselves.
I'd submit it to you, Claire, that you're an interesting. I mean, you're interesting in a lot of ways. I think that you actually you represent part of my thesis. You're someone who doesn't actually. If I strip the terminology away, I wouldn't be able to peg you as someone who had one particular view over the other. Like, or you hold a collection of views that I don't think just come down to tribalism. You just arguing for, pro UK policies or something.
Which I think we can all agree on, because anyone who lives under any government would want better government, and it's really so crazy now that we can't even pretend that the people who rule over us know what they're doing. It's so obvious that they don't, and then the question is, well, what are we going to do about it? And that's what I hope, people will discuss more, in the future, because, well, we might as well talk politics if World War III has started, shouldn't we?
Empire and tribalism are rough alternatives. Yeah. True.
Yeah, they really are. They really are. I was trying to highlight that. Those are, I'm not picking winners and losers in that. I'm just saying that those are, I completely agree.
Well, I think imperial reform, is a viable proposition. It's like, yeah, you have this empire. Maybe you want to run it better. Maybe you don't want everyone hating you. There are ways of achieving this once, the problems are properly understood and addressed.
Claire, what do you think about let's say hypothetically there's an empire that began as a revolutionary republic,
Mhm.
overthrowing an empire, and domestically it believes in universal rights, I suppose, God-given, no less.
Mhm.
It believes in limiting government to protect people from being infringed upon, their inalienable rights being infringed upon. And then this hypothetical country finds itself the inheritor of an empire, which it expands, and now internationally it's in the situation of managing for the sake of the empire. It has to manage, has to subvert those rights, which it says it protects domestically. It has to subvert the rights internationally to maintain that balance of power, of the imperial balance of power that it inherited. Is that a tricky scenario for?
We've
But
been really
maybe
protecting our own rights since 9/11 super well.
Yeah, I think we should, find out the characters of the people saying that in order for there to be liberty, we must suppress, all these liberties, and who made them the boss, and whether anything they say, is sensible, because it's very easy to fool the people if there are no rules, and that's why I keep, saying, if we're going to identify ourselves as a group of people playing Monopoly, then we have to be playing Monopoly, and we have to know what the rules are. And if one of us are not sure what the rules are, we should have access to the book of rules, and not have the banker saying, "I'm not going to let you look at the book of rules, because you're a peasant, and I'm not showing it to you." And if you ask them, you might find that the answer is to the same question is different at different times, and your suspicions might be aroused, because frankly, most people do not want to go to war. It's only the power elites who think, oh well, we've got a standing army now. We might as well make them pay for themselves. And that, I think, was one of the problems the founding fathers foresaw. They only wanted a citizens' militia because they knew that once you have a standing army, people will say, well, it's very expensive to keep one. Let's go and make them, do something for us for a change.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But I think, as with all empires, they live by the sword, die by the sword, and there's something peculiar about sea empires too, because they seem to be more reckless, in their declining years, and it's always the land empires that tend to be more cautious about what the things that they allow themselves to do.
So can we end on, so there's this, I don't know who this person is, but they seem like they're relatively new here in the corner or whatever, but I want to just say, let's do this for final words. How about, because I got to go, I want to just say what I think about this and then see what you guys say, and let's close up shop for the day. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
So, we talk about this a bunch in the TLC, where I think there's two different ways that you can see of Christian nationalism. One is the explicit version, which is typically done by people like Douglas Wilson and conservative evangelical types who want to explicitly make their understanding of Christian rules and ethics the guiding principles by fiat, and legislate those rules and structure the country under their explicit understanding and rules. But then there's also, as we've discovered through talking about this, there's also kind of the blue church implicit Christian nationalists who are on the other side of the culture war, who have they have a vision of how they understand America to be, but it's just assumed and universal and implicit. But it's the same, but they're both Christian nationalists, I would say. And then there's a weird kind of third group of people, which probably aligns more with like the blue church implicit group, which is which is related to this, because you say, as Americans, the only relevant question of identity is that between a zero-sum American fascism, which would be probably more along the lines of like, people would equate it more with like the Douglas Wilson conservative explicit group, and the universal human identity, which is somewhat the blue church implicit group, because like that's kind of more of like the global, we're all human beings, open borders. But like what you don't realize is like that's a kind of understanding of how America, when you say this is how America should operate, you are implicitly implying legislation. Like, this is what we should do. These are the rules. This is the structure of what our country should be. I would argue those are both nationalism. One is bleeding into a kind of globalism, but this is what I would argue, and it's one of the oldest philosophical questions of all time, is unity and multiplicity. Human identity is probably like the biggest group category, think of it as like Russian nesting dolls, that we could have of identity. Human is pretty universal. It applies to all human beings. But then the problem with that is the particularity aspect that Paul keeps coming back to. And what I always say is like, if meaning is always contextually determined and rooted in a person, then like the relational constraints Venn diagram of a person living in America is different than a person living in China, is different than a person living in sub-Saharan Africa. I don't think that you can make universal rules that apply the same way to all those people, because they are situated in very different places.
But we can agree that we want our government to govern in the national interest. Surely
but of a particular place and group and people.
Yeah, we want to think that the people in charge are the best people who could be in charge in our, nation. Don't we? I mean, even if we don't agree about who is the best person, it's like the elites should be the best people in the country to rule the country, and we shouldn't think that they are mad or unreliable liars who don't keep their promises. And I mean, we just want them to give an appearance of not being crazy and evil or stupid.
I think to both y'all's point, or additionally, we also don't want, I think we would agree that we consider it, a government would not be a good government if it appears to be operating in the interest of another country. Right? And I'm not that's not me dog whistling for one particular issue that's very topical right now. But if country A seems to be operating for the benefit of country B rather than for the citizens of country A, but then again, I mean, that's just a description of a client state for an empire of which we benefit. So there you go.
People need to know where they stand. The Europeans are basically, US.
Are they clients or
all the NATO countries, they're supposed to take a certain line towards Russia, and they do, without even thinking about it or talking about it much. So, and of course, it's difficult to come to terms with the low status of the Europeans. So they deny it, or they want to blame certain groups for it. But maybe it's their system. Their system is wrong. They shouldn't have fought two world wars with each other, and given their empire to the Americans who are now running things. And maybe America doesn't have the desire to or ability to run such a massive empire. And maybe that was why, Trump was trying to downsize the American empire into, just the Arctic to the Antarctic rather than global. We don't know now, because he keeps contradicting himself. So it's very hard to decide what he really wants.
At least it can be said that an empire that's very self-critical of imperialism is a very interesting empire to have. Because that has the tendency, I suppose, in its best form, to self-improve and to realign and to readjust from within, which is better than the alternative, which is where everybody just takes it as a law of nature that there are people on top, there are people on bottom, and this is how things always go. But an empire that's self-critical like ours, people continually take to the streets and say this isn't right. This empire should work like Jesus would want it, or something. And that creates that continual transformative evolutionary state that it's a feature, not a flaw, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say of this particular one, that we're constantly in debate about the nature of what we're up to.
All right, Claire, give us the last word. I gotta shut this down. I can't keep going. We'll keep talking.
I know. Thank you for hosting such a wonderful stream, and that we don't want to leave. My last word is the First Amendment is the American contribution to civilized human life, and I hope we can preserve it by being civil to the people we don't agree with, and that's so important. Thank you, Luke.
I agree. It's a good final word. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. That's it. Let's end with, what should we end? Should we end with Jeff's kitties? And I just dance. This is the steep slope. All right, it's going to keep going. Stop it. I want to do one other branding that I want to share with people also. One thing I want to say, sorry, I didn't give Claire the last word, but that was great, Claire. Something I've been realizing is, and this is a little bit of like a post-ideological thing, is like, I don't feel the need to close the deal in every conversation I have with people. I think feeling like you have to convince someone of your perspective and feeling like a frantic, like before this conversation ends, I have to convince you, is like, I think that's giving you evidence of something that's like deeper and more pathological. So I'm becoming more comfortable with people not agreeing with me, and I like it. I think that's a good thing. I think that's me putting my money where my mouth is. So here I'm going to play one more to close us out. Let's find it. Media assets, isn't it? Yes, here we go. I don't know that I've showed this branding. I maybe have, and that will be the end.
Over time, the more I interact with you, the more I realize you've been right this whole time. Not always, but sometimes.
Oh, Sam! I love you too.
I also know how to push your buttons, but